So a rumored Sonic Heroes Remake has been causing quite the stir within the Sonic fanbase over the past month. At first, everyone was sure it was happening because a credible leaker said it was so. Another leaker then corroborated it, which resulted in the first leaker having to specify that their wording was poor and that they're not actually sure if it's happening, and then blamed the other leaker for having gotten their information from a middleman that the first leaker trusted, and so they want to stop leaking stuff forever, which got everyone mad at leaker number 2 because everyone liked leaker number 1, but now leaker number 1 is back while 2 is doubling down about the Heroes remake still happening, and I don't care. Despite this public display putting a Heroes remake back up in the air, I'm still of the belief that within our collective lifetimes, unless you're like 90, we will see a remake of Sonic Heroes hit store shelves. Or the ether if physical gaming dies, either or. There's a couple of reasons for this. 1. Sonic Heroes is one of the highest selling 3D Sonic games, selling more than a majority of others at least, only recently being topped by Frontiers as well. Heroes is a Sonic game that a ton of people grew up with, even a lot of people I know who don't give a shit about Sonic. Oh, for that to be me. They still grew up with Heroes. It was one of those games that everybody seemed to have as a kid, along with Crash the Wrath of Cortex and New Super Mario Bros. This is because it was the first multi-platform Sonic game, coming out on every major console at the time, which leads into number 2. Because Heroes was Sega's first Sonic outing on new hardware, knowing it would be coming out on pretty much everything, they opted to use the Renderware engine to make it easier to port the game between each system. Renderware has since become unavailable for purchase ever since it was bought out by EA, and so Sega basically has no choice other than a remake. And 3, Heroes is liked just enough for people to be excited for a remake, but just disliked enough for some folks to not mind if it ends up being not one-to-one or of an amazing quality or anything. An expectation that would severely loom over a potential Adventure 1 or 2 remake. And if you've stuck around on my channel for long enough, subscribe, it's fairly obvious that I'm of the belief that Sonic Heroes is the greatest Sonic game of all time. But despite the game, being pretty much perfect, that isn't to say there aren't a couple of things I'd do differently. Some for my own sake, and some for the sake of more people seeing its inner beauty that you have to dig deep down to find. And so today I figured I'd go over how I would remake Sonic Heroes, what I'd want to see stay the same, and what I wouldn't mind them trying to do differently. But first, if there's one thing that needs to be in a Sonic Heroes remake, it's a healthy and cheaper alternative to eating out all the time. I mean, I gotta afford the game somehow. Thankfully, this video is sponsored by Cook Unity. Cook Unity is an excellent meal delivery service. With over 50 chefs coming from the best restaurants in the country to bring their signature dishes to your table every week, why would you ever want to eat out again? All you gotta do is set your 7 different dietary preferences like vegan or gluten-free, and pick out as little as 4 or as much as 16 meals a week. There are hundreds of options here. The subscription is also super flexible. You can skip, pause, or cancel whenever you want. I really enjoyed the grilled chicken with herb tomato salad made by Chef Nora Nolasco from Los Angeles. And there's a bunch more in here that I'm super excited to try. So go to cookunity.com/splash50 or click the link in the description below and use my code splash50 for 50% off your first order. It's the perfect chance to try Cook Unity out for yourself. Once again, that's code SPLASH50, and thanks to Cook Unity for sponsoring this video. Possibly the most controversial topic surrounding a potential Sonic Heroes remake would have to be the story, and more specifically, the voice acting. Personally, I think it's more than likely Sega would simply just take the lines from the existing game instead of spending the money to re-record a whopping 14 characters. I know folks were debating over whether or not it would be a good move to replace everyone with their current cast members for consistency, but I think that would be a nightmare and ruin so much of the charm Heroes has. I'm personally not a huge fan of the current voice cast, especially Sonic, Knuckles, Amy, Rouge, also Shadow, and Omega, okay, almost everyone. I just don't think they have the same energy that the Dreamcast or even 4Kids cast brought to them. And so I just can't see how some of these lines would work with how the characters sound now, therefore requiring more money to spend on rewrites. Just reanimate the cutscenes, that's all you need. I don't think Sega really cares about updating the voice cast for remakes, considering they have literally no issue with having multiple Sonic voices at the same time. But also because when needing to record new lines for Color's Ultimate, instead of updating Tails with his new voice actress, Colleen O'Shaughnessy, they went through the effort of contacting his old voice actors from the time, Kate Higgins, to not only record new lines for the game, but also to reprise her role for the Rise of the Wisps cartoon that released alongside it. It appears that, in Sega's mind, whatever voice a character had in a game is how they sounded at that point in the canon, and going back and changing it would only be odd. And because I worry about some of these actors' abilities to still voice a character they haven't played in any major way for almost 2 decades now, Looking at you, Teals, that'd be a real tonal shift. I think they're better off just reusing the original lines.
It's gonna crash! Ah!
Of course, this is a case where Ryan is being put on the spot, so he could do a better job with good direction. But I don't know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm one of the few people out there who actually likes the voices in Sonic Heroes. Even Teals. I suppose secondly, I think that leads us to the graphics, where mostly, I would keep them the exact same. Heroes is known, even by its detractors, as being one of the best visually looking Sonic games out there. The stages are bright, colorful, and abstract, the perfect translation of the classic Sonic games into 3D. So all I would expect is a look and feel similar to the remakes done for Team Sonic Racing. You can't see much of it in the races themselves, but looking at screenshots, it's clear they put a bunch of time into recreating these places like Seaside Hill and Bingo Highway. And they're not one-to-one either, introducing other creative elements like going inside a bingo ball cage or adding a cool vaporwave sky. So maybe it could be cool to have a bit more visual variety between the teams, to at least help disguise the fact that you're replaying the same stages 4 times over. Something I really don't want to see though is for them to try and update the character models to look more like the modern designs, like the modern designs. Most can agree they're harmless at best and hideous at worst, actively hindering Sonic's visual identity in a lot of places, just looking kinda boring a lot of the time with little to no effort in playing with his expressions. For example, I'm really hoping soon that Sega finally understands that having a constant side smirk for Sonic doesn't always look good. It seems like every other outsourced Sonic animation understands this, along with the games up until Unleashed, but the model they use really restricts mouth movements. Coming down so far in his face and only really appearing to have one animation that constantly cycle through. He's ugly, she's ugly, he's ugly, he's okay. But the gaming industry is moving away from this ultra sanitized look Sonic has been using for the past almost 2 decades. Mario's changed for the better. Crash, at the very least, is more stylized, even if his redesign clearly shows a lack of understanding for why Crash was appealing in the first place, veering away from crazy to bumbling and cool. I have a theory that a lot of Sonic fans don't care about this because their first exposure with Sonic was when he looked like this, and so to them, that's all Sonic has ever been, you know, why change it? But I think we can all agree, he doesn't need a drastic redesign or anything, he just needs to look more stylized. Try more to replicate the 2D artwork fans so often gush about, instead of trying to make him so perfectly bland looking. Fit for any situation. Quite possibly my biggest hope for a remake with Heroes, though, might be a little more controversial. And that is, by God, please, for the love of all things holy, do not simplify the controls for babies and or dumb people. Hero's biggest complaint would have to be towards the controls. Sonic is too fast, I can't control where I'm going. He moves too much at the slightest push of a button. And that's fair. That's a valid complaint I agree with. Maybe they could tone it down a little bit, even if I believe that the whole point in it being there is to encourage you to get better at controlling Sonic at a high speed. You know, if you can't handle that, then switch to Knuckles. To me, Sonic Heroes was always the best 3D Sonic game when it came to adapting the Thrillian mindset that classics are most known for. Upper path good, middle is neutral, and the bottom is harder. You know, like using your character abilities to get to the top in Grand Metropolis. Have a grind reel to take you to the end with goodies along the way. Fuck up or don't even bother with it, then try to enjoy a bottom route filled with enemies you need to defeat to progress. After you get up there, you have another chance to get to the top. Fuck it up, fight more enemies. Even more simple moments like the start of Bullet Station. If you take the normal path, you have to defeat or run past a couple enemies to go lower and then grind reel to the top. Or you could time things just right and use the wall jump to avoid getting knocked down by moving platforms, and then you can skip over the whole section and get a prize. Or better yet, how about build up a ton of speed on the grind reel you open on, then make a massive jump as soon as you launch off to homing attack the wall before even touching the grind. Not only is it faster, but it's cool. The main thing a Sonic Heroes Remake needs to accomplish isn't making the game more simple. Instead, it needs to do a better job at making the player aware of all its intricacies, especially the rock, paper, scissors aspect, that they quite literally never inform you about. The game needs a better tutorial in general. They just teach you the most basic of mechanics that you can do while switching characters. Sonic is speed, Knuckles is punch, and Tails is fly. But there's so much more here that is never explained to you, and more often than not it revolves around the level up system. There's some stuff in here that I'm sure some of you guys never knew about, stuff that would have made your time with the game much more pleasant. For example, a big criticism would have to be with the combat. Where with Knuckles and Omega especially, it's way too easy to fall off the edge of a level and into a bottomless pit, because your character launches forward about 10 feet every time they attack. Well, did you know that for Knuckles at least, if you mash the punch button, he will instead do a series of quick jabs that keeps your movement to a minimum and makes it easier to stay on target. The big attacks are meant to be used for closing distance and for starting the combo. Combat becomes much quicker when you know what character to use for what enemy, and how leveling up can make you bypass having to switch to another character altogether. How about the further you level up Sonic, resulting in the more you see his homing attack adopt attributes from his other abilities? You oftentimes find yourself having to stop to use Sonic's tornado attack to either get rid of enemy shields, reveal their weak points, or to climb up these poles. Well, as I'm sure most of you know, but maybe there's some who don't. Once Sonic levels up his homing attack enough, it now has the tornado move built in. Instead of having to stop and do the slow Sonic wind attack, now I can simply homing attack and it'll do the same thing, which is indicated through nothing more than a visual change to the homing attack aura. They never tell you about this. When you get the hang of things, there is such a flow to Sonic Heroes. If you don't just play it like a regular run and jump Sonic game and take the time to actually think about what character would be best suited for each situation, then I think it becomes an immensely fun experience that most people don't see because of trying to brute force their way to the end, because the learning curve is pretty slow, and also something that don't teach you about. It's tedious for a lot of people to have to stop what they're doing to switch between characters, most likely why they filled the game to the brim with signs that tell you what to do at each moment, along with ones that switch you on the fly. But the more you play and grow accustomed to it, the easier it becomes to make quick decisions like this on the fly. A level that might have taken you 10 minutes originally can now be taken care of in 5. And that, to me, is the joy of Sonic Heroes. It is so satisfying to find what character would be best to use in every situation. It's fun to try and break the rules and see if you can get through certain segments with a character the game didn't tell you to use. There's a level of freedom to Sonic Heroes that I would hate to see simplified in a remake, just for the sake of making it more accessible. It's a Sonic game that thrives on the mentality of getting better the more you play, and the more you think about what you're doing. But to be fair though, you have to have a high IQ to understand Sonic Heroes. And I want to make one final suggestion for a Sonic Heroes remake, a decision which would never happen, but one that I think will change perception of the game's more frequently bitched about aspect. And that's the fact that you have to play the campaign 4 times to get the final ending. Sure, there are slight differences between each team, but not enough to justify 4 playthroughs, especially if you didn't even enjoy the one. Of course, there could be some stuff here done to rectify that, like making the Chaotix missions less tedious with less demanding requirements, or having it so you only need to play through one of the teams to get to the final boss, which I personally would hate. Get good, bro. If you don't want to play through all the teams to get the final story, then play a different game. The final boss isn't even that fun. But my suggestion would be, switch up the level order. It wouldn't be as easy as I make it sound. It would require changing the difficulty a bit in certain levels, as well as reconsidering some of the dialogue and where it would play. But I think if Heroes' different stories were handled more similarly to Sonic Rush, then I think it would make each playthrough at least feel a tad more unique. Sonic Rush basically had Bleus play through all the same levels as Sonic, except instead of starting off at the jungle area and moving to Water Palace afterwards, Bleus starts in the carnival stage and then goes to the jungle area. It's all mixed up. It does wonders in keeping a bit of variety. You never know which area is going to come next, which removes a bit of the repetition. Like the Team Dark campaign starts with a cutscene of Rouge freeing Shadow from the capsule. Where do we see a bunch of these same capsules? Real Canyon and Bullet Station. Start their campaign there instead of Seaside Hill. Maybe start Chaotix off in Grand Metropolis since they run a detective agency. Would make sense to have that in a city. Team Rose can start in Frog Forest. Maybe that's where they try to find Froggy first. That would make sense. See what I mean? It's not really doing anything that drastically different, but I think it would make each playthrough a little more exciting. You're already remaking it from the ground up, so why not? I highly doubt they'll do that. They'll just do a 1-to-1 remake, I'm calling it now. Bad design choices and all. And if they aren't doing that, then there's no way in hell we're gonna see them do shit like adding another team. No way. So really, those are all the stuff I could ever want from a Sonic Heroes remake. Basically, keep the fundamentals and its visual identity the same, but clean up the bugs and address some of the criticisms most prevalent with it, while making sure not to have the method of fixing those complaints to be stripping the game of what a lot of people do like about it, me included. And if you do all that, Sega, then I really think you could change the general perception of what is an incredibly special game to me. So don't fuck it up.